two big things that I was focusing on. One was the sort of trends on the demand side, and the second one was the trends on the supply side. And on the demand side, you've got two different directions. The domestic per capita consumption of apples has been sliding by about 1% a year for the last 20 years. It's been particularly, even in Washington State, where we've introduced a lot of new varieties, our share of the national per capita consumption is declining. But on the other hand, there's these tremendous opportunities in the international markets. Countries like India, China, Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, where there's large populations and incomes are rising very rapidly, and in many cases they can't produce all of their apple needs. There seem to be tremendous marketing opportunities internationally, but in order to tap those, there's an awful lot of things we have to do on the supply side, on the production side, production and packing and so on.
What are those things?
Well, the first big one is that we have a real battle for resources: land, labor, water, energy. There are so many competing claims on those, and in general, agriculture has a tough time competing for them. For example, recently in the Columbia Basin, because of our cheap electricity, we've had huge companies like Microsoft and Google come in to set up storage facilities. Well, clearly, no apple grower is going to be able to compete with Microsoft or Google for good orchard land if that's the land they need. So we're facing all sorts of pressures like that, and then of course growers all over the country are familiar with labor pressures. So those are issues that we're going to have to face. First of all, we may have a shortage of some of these inputs, and secondly, we're probably going to face higher prices for them. But at the same time, because demand domestically is not growing, we can't expect higher prices. So for growers to stay in business, they're going to have to increase their productivity, increase their efficiency, get more output, especially more high-value output out of the inputs that they do have.
It sounds like you're saying they need to increase their yields.
Yield is just one thing, but certainly the quality of the yield is going to be really important. And it's not just the quality in the sense, the old sense of taste and texture, but quality where you're meeting the standards that Walmart is setting for you, or the new federal standards on food safety. There are all these new impositions that international markets that are kind of dormant, like Western Europe or Japan, or where we have very little access. They are quite picky, but the markets where we have a lot of opportunities, like India, Indonesia, China, Russia, they are much less picky about those sorts of things. And indeed, many other suppliers like Chile, New Zealand, are deciding not even bother to go to Europe for some of their products because the hassle of all these requirements is too big. So these newer markets have the double advantage. They're growing fast, they're big and they're growing fast, and they're not as quite as demanding on the growth. India is a vegetarian country, so you've got an extra benefit there. And India is also a country that, with 1 billion people, they can produce 2 million metric tons of apples. So they've got because of their climate, there's very limited areas where they can grow apples. Indonesia is virtually nowhere they can grow apples commercially. So these markets offer tremendous opportunity. It has been a major competitor, but it seems even there that the income levels are rising so rapidly and are going to continue to rise so rapidly that China will become a major importer of apples. Now, initially they're going to be major importers of Southern Hemisphere off-season apples, but anything that gets Chilean apples or New Zealand apples or Argentinian off the world market and into China is good for the rest of us. So whether we get into China or whether somebody else gets in, it's going to be a big boost for the world market. There are two big points that I was making. One was that we absolutely have to have an apple promotional program, both domestically and internationally. Right now, for example, Washington State spends about $8 million on their entire global export promotion program. So they're trying to sell 3 billion people by spending $8 million. It just is not going to work. In the domestic market, the Washington Apple Commission was declared unconstitutional. So we haven't had a promotional program here for years. You still have one in Michigan, you still have one in New York, but they're quite small. But if we're going to reverse the decline in per capita consumption, we have to have strong promotion and marketing programs. And by strong, I mean, maybe in the $100 million a year category, because that's what you need to compete with. That was the other point I was showing, was that we're really competing in the snack market with the potato chips, Coca-Cola, all those sorts of really popular, highly promoted snack foods. Well, I think that certainly since Washington produces 60% of the fresh apples in the U.S., they have got to take the lead. They've got to put their hands in their pocket and come up with the initial money. Now, New York already has that assessment, so they're already in the game. And for some reason, it's not unconstitutional for New York to have a promotional program. So there are a number of promotional programs already existing, but the big missing link is Washington State. And then in particular, we're dominant in many of the newer varieties like Fuji, Greyworm, Camel, and so on. So our absence from the promotional end is really felt. Our breeding has become kind of global. For example, Branch Fruit Trees here in Yakima, they're members of a global consortium to commercialize New Zealand varieties coming out of the New Zealand breeding program. And a number of our other nurseries, and I suspect it's the same with nurseries all over the U.S., that they have international connections now. And so when a new variety is developed, say in Belgium, they send samples of it around to about 50 growing districts around the world to see how it's going to do, with the hope that they can sell it to every country around the world. One of the figures I showed was that on average, in 8 out of the last 14 years, Washington growers actually lost money. So we're making these tremendous changes, but at great cost. But more and more growers are going out of business. The data I have shows that per capita consumption of all fruit in the U.S. has only gone up 3% in the last 20 years. Consumption of apples has gone up, down 21%. Oranges down 30%. So there's a disconnect here, and I think part of it is that we're losing the younger generation. They just are not picking up the fruit-eating habit like the older generation did. I think it's going to require as much marketing and promotion and gimmickry as anything else, because if you look at the popular fruits, blueberries has become really popular because it's a superfruit. I mean, this is just some very clever ad man gives them this. So consumers feel that they can pop 3 blueberries and they're getting as much nourishment as if they eat a whole apple. And the same, you're probably familiar with the palm juice phenomenon of pomegranates has become. So some fruits are doing a better job of selling to the modern consumer, particularly to the young consumer.